We always say true life stories are scarier than any horror film or novel. In this list of 25 true horror stories, we look at some of the terror some people have had to endure. Some with happy endings, and some without. As with all of our bite-sized compilations, if you want us to expand on any of them, let us know in the comments below. Now before we begin, we'd like to say a special thank you to this video sponsor, Magellan TV. If you've tuned into a Top 5s video in the last year, you've most likely heard us rave about our exciting partnership with Magellan TV, the best source for the hottest and most intriguing content available online. You know about their curated documentaries and bingeable television shows, and how they go above the realm of true crime to deliver unbelievable deep dives into other topics, such as space or history or the supernatural. In other words, there is always something to watch, no matter where your interests lay. To give you a better glance into the plethora of videos within the Magellan TV library, we want to talk a little more in depth about one of our favourite titles we recently watched, that we know will make you fall in love with the service all over again. This week we want to highlight the documentary, Who Killed Trudy Adams, a 3-episode series taking us deep within the mystery of Sydney, Australia's real-life Twin Peaks. The show doesn't simply focus on the murder of a young girl, however, but rather takes us through the hidden darkness in the sunny surfing culture of Sydney's northern beaches in the late 1970s. They do the perfect job of balancing true crime and cultural criticisms, telling an intriguing story, while raising awareness regarding crimes that otherwise would have gone under the radar. It's the perfect mix of mystery and humanity, exactly how we curate our own videos on Top 5s. Who Killed Trudy Adams is also a new release, part of Magellan TV's 15 to 20 hours of brand new content they will add to their library each week, always leaving fans of true crime and other relevant topics with something fresh to binge and enjoy. So stop waiting, use our link in the description to access a free month trial and jump into the jaw-dropping adventure of Who Killed Trudy Adams and other top-notch documentaries. We promise you won't regret it. And now, if you haven't already done so, hit those lights, sit back and enjoy. Weighted down with iron shoes. On July 11th, 1994, police recovered the body of a man from the sea off North Sea Island near Germany. He was found wearing a tie with a club design, navy French-made trousers, a light blue shirt, and handmade luxury loafers. The immaculately dressed man was nicknamed the Gentleman. He had suffered violent blows to his head and upper body, and it was determined he was British. Also attached to his body were a pair of iron shoe molds, the same size as his own. Chillingly, the shoe molds had been attached to weigh the body down. Despite numerous appeals, no one ever identified the man. 30 years later, his body was exhumed and DNA extracted to try and identify the Gentleman. And in 2022, a new appeal for information, along with a reconstruction, was released. To date, the man's identity and the story around the iron soles is a mystery. Horrific neglect by parents. Lacey Fletcher suffered from locked-in syndrome, a rare neurological disorder characterized by complete paralysis of voluntary muscles, except for those that controlled her eyes. Lacey relied completely on her parents, Sheila and Clay, for her care. However, when police arrived at the Fletcher's home in January 2022, after her parents called 911, they were confronted with the most ghastly scene. 36-year-old Lacey was found dead, fused to a living room couch, covered from head to toe in urine, liquid feces and insect bites, with live bugs and rodent excrement nearby in the otherwise tidy home in Louisiana. It's hard to believe Lacey's outwardly respectable parents could neglect their daughter in such a way, and they are rightly now facing murder charges. Lacey was last seen in public outside of her family home 15 years ago. What happened between then and now inside the home is currently under investigation. The Silent Twins' Deadly Bond. June and Jennifer Gibbons were identical twins born to Caribbean parents in 1963. The family moved to Britain from Barbados as part of the Windrush generation and eventually settled in Haverfordwest, Wales. The twin sisters were inseparable, and their language, a sped-up Bajan Creole, made it difficult for people to understand them. The twins were bullied at school, and the trauma caused their language to become even more peculiar, until eventually it was unintelligible to others, and eventually they spoke to no one except each other and their younger sister Rose. The twins were sent to separate boarding schools, but soon became catatonic and entirely withdrawn when parted. Reunited in their teenage years, the twins began using drugs and alcohol, and after committing a series of crimes in 1981, they were admitted to Broadmoor Hospital and sentenced to infinite detention under the Mental Health Act. They remained at Broadmoor for 11 years. During their stay at Broadmoor, they began to believe that it was necessary for one of them to die, for the other one to live a normal life, and after much discussion, Jennifer agreed to make the sacrifice. In March 1993, the twins were transferred from Broadmoor to a more open clinic in Wales. On arrival, Jennifer could not be roused, and after being taken to hospital, she died. There was no evidence of drugs or poison in her system, and her death remains a mystery. After Jennifer's death, June started living quietly and independently near her parents in West Wales, where she remains to this day. The twins' story also inspired the 1998 Manic Street Preachers song, Tsunami, which unfortunately due to copyright we cannot play, but it's worth a listen to. Maddie Clifton. When 8-year-old Maddie Clifton disappeared from her home on November 3, 1998, an entire town sprang into action to try and find her, and hundreds of volunteers joined the search parties. 7 days later, Melissa Phillips, the Cliftons' neighbour, was cleaning her 14-year-old son's Josh's room and noticed his waterbed was leaking. But as she looked closer, she realised it wasn't water, it was fluid from Maddie's body. Josh Phillips confessed to the murder, saying he had struck Maddie in the face while playing baseball with her, then accidentally killed her when he hit her with a bat to stop her from crying. But Phillips's account was only half the story. The truth was far darker. After beating her, Josh stabbed her to death with a utility knife, and most disturbing of all, he then slept above Maddie Clifton's rotting corpse for an entire week, while joining in her search with his family. The Girl in the Box. On the 15th of September 1981, 10-year-old Ursula Herrmann headed home by bike from her cousin's house to her home in Etching, Germany, but she never returned. Her frantic family knew something was wrong and started searching for Ursula in a nearby forest. Police were called, and eventually Ursula's red bike was found. 36 hours after her disappearance, the phone rang at the Herrmann house. When Ursula's parents picked up, there was silence, followed by a short, familiar jingle, which they recognized from the Bayern 3 radio station. 3 more similar calls followed. Then came a ransom note demanding 2 million Deutschmarks, or £450,000. The family, who were not wealthy, raised the money with the help of neighbours and the state, and awaited further instructions, but they heard nothing. 2 weeks passed, and the police decided to search the forest again. In a tiny glade, they discovered a bolted box. Inside was the cold, lifeless body of Ursula. It appeared that the kidnappers had planned to keep Ursula alive. The box was fitted with a shelf and a seat that doubled as a toilet, and was stocked with water, cans and snacks, as well as books, a radio and comics. To enable Ursula to breathe, the box had a ventilation system made from plastic plumbing pipes, which extended to ground level. But whoever designed it had failed to realise that without a machine to circulate the air, the oxygen would quickly run out, which is exactly what happened. Frozen. In February of 2012, 2 snowmobilers came across a car in Sweden's icy northeast. After digging the car out, they found a man in the back seat. The man was pulled out alive. He was emaciated, unable to move, and could barely speak. He was identified as 44-year-old Peter Skylberg, who claimed he had driven off the main road on December 19, 2011, onto forest tracks where his car became stuck. Peter had been in the car for 60 days, living off just snow, in temperatures that fell as low as minus 30 degrees Celsius. Many didn't believe his story, but experts backed it up, saying it was possible his body went into hibernation while he was in the car, in what they have described as the case of a lifetime. Lost boy Larry. On August 12, 1973, a search was called off for a 7-year-old boy named Larry who claimed to be lost in the New Mexico mountains. 5 days earlier, CB operators in the southwestern states of New Mexico, Arizona, and California began receiving some very strange transmissions from a sobbing child who called himself Larry. He said he was speaking from the inside of an overturned pickup truck and that his dad, who lay beside him, might be dead from a heart attack. Hundreds of people as well as military search teams began searching in New Mexico's central mountains. At one point, Larry told an Albuquerque radio operator that he could see aeroplane searchlights that had flown over the mountains. However, after searching extensively for 5 days, radio contact was lost and the search was called off. The authorities quickly wrote the whole thing off to a hoax, but was it really? Those who heard Harry's desperate call for help over CB radio believe it was real. And to this day, no one knows for sure. Could it be that he was a real missing boy abandoned to die in the New Mexico mountains? All that we know is that no trace of him has ever been found, at least not yet. Terror 30 meters below. On May 26, 2013, a tugboat capsized off the coast of Nigeria. It sank 30 meters to the seabed, taking all 12 crew members with it. However, the cook, Harrison O'Keefe, managed to scramble to a room which had enough air to keep him alive, and he rigged a single platform to keep his body partially above water and delay hypothermia. Left all alone in the dark, all O'Keefe could do was pray. For almost 2.5 days, Harrison was trapped when he spotted a light. A team of divers had come to inspect the vessel and retrieve the bodies. This is the moment Harrison reached out to one of those shocked divers.
Alright, you found one, yeah? He's alive, he's alive! Okay, keep him there.
A careful rescue operation was mounted, and Harrison lost consciousness, but managed to survive. He spent 2 days in a decompression chamber and suffered from peeling skin, reoccurring nightmares, and insatiable hunger, but was otherwise in good health. Sadly, all of his 11 crewmates died in the accident. The reincarnation of Shanti Devi. Shanti Devi was born in Delhi, India in 1926. Soon after her 4th birthday, she started talking about a past life and told her parents her real name. Her real home was in Manthura. When she started school, she told a teacher that she was married and had died 10 days after giving birth to a child. Speaking in Mathura dialect, she said her husband's name was Kedar Nath. The headmaster of her school located a merchant by that name in Mathura who had lost his wife, Lagdi Devi, 9 years earlier, 10 days after giving birth to a son. Kedar Nath was contacted and travelled to Delhi to meet Shanti Devi. She immediately recognised him and his son and conveyed several details of their life together. He was soon convinced that Shanti Devi was indeed the reincarnation of his dead wife, Lagdi Devi. The case was brought to the attention of Mahatma Gandhi, who arranged for Shanti Devi to travel to Mathura. When she arrived on the 15th of November 1935, Shanti recognised several family members, including the grandfather of Lagdi Devi. However, she was dismayed that Kedar had not kept his deathbed promise not to marry again. A report published in 1936 concluded that Shanti Devi was indeed the reincarnation of Lagdi Devi. Shanti did not marry and died on the 27th of December 1987, still convinced she was Lagdi Devi in a former life. What's your thoughts on reincarnation? Lawrence Singleton. In September 1978, 15-year-old Mary Vincent was hitchhiking to get to her grandpa's house in California when a blue van pulled up and offered her a ride. Mary was tired, and even though alarm bells rang, she just wanted to get off her feet, so accepted the lift. As the drive went on, Mary fell asleep, but when she awoke, she realized that they were in Nevada, not California. Mary panicked, but the man assured her it was an honest mistake. Later, the man stopped, beat and raped Mary and threw her outside of his van. He then cut off both her arms with a hatchet and pushed an unconscious Mary into a concrete pipe and left her to die just off of Interstate 5 in Del Porto Canyon. Mary woke up and walked for 3 miles covered in blood and armless, before finding and alerting a passing couple who took her to a hospital. Miraculously, she survived and was able to identify her attacker as Lawrence Singleton and testify against him. Singleton received 14 years for the attack on Mary, but was released after 8 and went on to murder mother of 3 Roxanne Hayes in 1997. Mary now lives her life with prosthetics. Beware of the bear. Camping and outdoor life is often a fun adventure. However, for husband and wife, Jacqueline Perry and Mark Jordan, it turned into the ultimate nightmare. In 2005, the couple were camping at a provincial park in northern Ontario when they were both attacked by a black bear. As the bear tried to carry Jacqueline into the woods, Mark managed to stop it by stabbing the creature several times with his Swiss Army knife. He then carried his mauled wife to their kayak and started paddling to the nearest campsite yelling for help. A boat with a doctor on board came to the rescue and desperately tried to treat Jacqueline, but ultimately she succumbed to her injuries. Although it's a rare occurrence, if you are camping or trekking in an area where bears live, and they are hungry or with young, beware, as there is always a chance of such an attack. Left for dead in a sewer. On February 23, 2002, 19-year-old Maria Viricheva had just had a furious row with her boyfriend. She was 3 months pregnant at the time and visibly upset. Alexander Pishushkin approached her and pretended to comfort her, and persuaded her to go with him into the park. As they walked, Maria felt assured when she realized he lived close to her, but as they approached an open sewage well, Alexander grabbed Maria's hair and started banging her head against the iron well cover. At this moment, she knew he was going to kill her, so she let herself fall into the 25-foot sewer well. She somehow managed to sit up amongst the choking sewage that was sweeping her away, and many hours later managed to lift a manhole cover and scream for help. Maria was taken to hospital and recovered from her ordeal, but when she gave a policeman her attacker's name and address, he didn't believe her. Alexander Pishushkin was a serial killer who was later convicted of killing over 49 people. He became known as the chessboard killer, as his gruesome target had been 64, the number of squares on a chessboard. Many lives could have been saved if the police had believed Maria that day. Dead animals in the walls. Doing home renovations can be quite stressful, especially if you are living in the house at the same time. But for a family in Pennsylvania, what they discovered during renovations was truly unsettling. The Bretzowitz family, from Auburn, decided to update the insulation of the home they bought in 2011. But as the work commenced, they discovered lurking behind the walls dozens of dead animals carefully wrapped in newspaper, along with half-used spices and other items. The newspapers dated back to the 1930s and 40s. This disgusting find was not picked up on the survey when they bought the house in 2011, and for over a decade they'd been living with the animal corpses, and they still aren't sure if there are more buried deep in the wall cavities. The dead animals were sent to an expert who believed that the former homeowner was likely practicing Dutch magic and used this process to heal ailments in something referred to as powwowing. The terror of Operation Wandering Soul. Operation Wandering Soul was a creepy USA propaganda experiment orchestrated to frighten the superstitious instincts of Viet Cong during the Vietnam War. Its intention was to manipulate the Vietnamese fear of ghosts, ingrained culturally from a belief of wandering souls, in the event a decreased individual isn't properly appeased in burial. This is the type of recording that echoed through the jungle during the Vietnam War. As if war wasn't terrifying enough for them, just imagine that. Kennedy Ife. This is the sad, horrific story of Kennedy Ife, whose family mistook his mental illness for being possessed by evil spirits. On August 19, 2016, 26-year-old Kennedy Ife who lived with his family in Enfield, North London, became aggressive, bit his father, and threatened to cut off his own penis. The deeply religious family feared he had been possessed by evil spirits, and rather than calling a doctor, they sought help from the church and attempted to cure Kennedy through restraint and prayer, and members of the family used overwhelming force to calm Kennedy. However, when Kennedy became very unwell, his brother called 999, but when paramedics arrived, they were unable to save him, and he was pronounced dead. The post-mortem revealed more than 60 injuries on Kennedy's body, including a possible bite. 7 members of his family were charged with manslaughter, false imprisonment, and causing or allowing the death of a vulnerable adult. All 7 of them were eventually acquitted. It's sad that their misguided religious beliefs caused the death of a much-loved family member. Don't mess with a proton beam. In 1978, Anatoly Bogorsky, a researcher at the Institute for High Energy Physics in Russia, was fixing a malfunction on the largest particle accelerator in the Soviet Union, the U-70 synchrotron. It was a fairly routine procedure, but it went horribly wrong. As Anatoly leaned over the equipment, the safety mechanism failed, and he found himself in the path of the 76 GeV proton beam. The beam passed through the back of his head, the occipital and temporal lobes of his brain, and left middle ear, and out through the left-hand side of his nose. The exposed parts of his head received a local dose of 200,000 to 300,000 rodgens. Reportedly, he saw a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, but did not feel any pain. Immediately, Anatoly understood the severity of what had happened, but continued working until his face swelled to beyond recognition, and he was rushed to hospital, where he wasn't expected to survive, as it was believed that he had received far in excess of a fatal dose of radiation. Over the next few days, his skin started to peel, revealing the path that the proton beam had burned through parts of his face, his bone, and the brain tissue underneath. Remarkably, he did survive and carried on working, despite some lasting effects of the exposure. Cutting off your arms to survive. In late April 2003, Aaron Ralston went on a solo hike in Utah's Blue John Canyon, but as he made his way down a narrow canyon wall, he dislodged an 800-pound boulder that pinned him down by his arm. For 5 days he was stuck, and his food and water had run out. The only way he could survive was by cutting off his arm to free himself. With no other option, Aaron broke his arm, before using his blunt multi-tool to cut off the limb. In the process, he lost 1/4 of his blood. He then hiked out of the canyon, climbed down a 65-foot cliff, and walked a further 6 miles to get help. Miraculously, he survived the ordeal and went on to live a full life missing half an arm. Aaron's remarkable bravery and will to live is documented in his book Between a Rock and a Hard Place, and the 2010 movie 127 Hours, which is well worth a watch. The mystery of the Enfield monster. In 1973, the residents of Enfield, Illinois, reported seeing an unknown creature. Eyewitnesses said it was about 4 foot 4 inches tall, with 3 legs, grey fur, huge pink eyes, and 2 arms attached to the front of its body. Some said it resembled a monkey, and at least one witness believed it was humanoid in appearance. The creature apparently had impressive speed and agility, and it screeched like a wildcat. Henry McDaniel, the first person to report the creature, told how it was scratching outside his house, and when he investigated, he found himself face to face with the monster. McDaniel ran to get his gun, and out of fear, fired several times at the creature, causing it to run off. When the police arrived, they found unusual footprints with 6 toe pads, along with some odd scratch marks on the house. As more reports came in, police ended up investigating many more sightings. People became so convinced of the creature's existence that fear enveloped the usually quiet town. Theories ranged from an escaped kangaroo to aliens or a failed genetic experiment. To date, the creature's identity has never been established, and there are still some who live in fear of the return of the Enfield monster. The Watcher House. In June 2014, Derek and Maria Brothers, were excited to move into their dream house at 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. But as the couple prepared to settle into the $1.3 million house with their 3 children, they started to receive a series of disturbing letters in the mail that were signed The Watcher. The content of the letters seemed to indicate someone was watching their every move, and they were unhappy with the changes being made to the house. Over the course of a few weeks, the letters got more sinister and threatening, until eventually Derek Broaddus called the police. He also contacted the former owners, who confirmed that they too had had the odd letters from the Watcher. DNA found on the envelope indicated that a woman had sealed them with her saliva. The family became so desperate that they reached out to the real-life FBI agent who inspired the character of Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lambs, but no one could figure out who or why they were receiving the letters. After 6 months, Derek and Maria had had enough and put the house on the market. But when it didn't sell, the Broadduses made an application to pull the house down and redevelop the plot, but it was rejected. This is one of the last letters they received. Maybe a car accident, maybe a fire. Maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away but makes you feel sick day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet, loved ones suddenly die, planes and cars and bicycle crash, bones break. You wonder who the Watcher is. Turn around idiots. After years on the market, the Watcher house finally sold in 2019, with the Broadduses taking a $440,000 loss. There was a silver lining for the family, however, as Netflix bought the rights to their creepy tale in 2019 and are due to release it in 2022. The Tucker telephone torture device. The Tucker telephone was a modern-day torture device invented in Arkansas to use on the Tucker State Prison farm inmates. The device consisted of an old-fashioned telephone wired in sequence with 2 batteries. The electrodes coming from it were attached to a prisoner's big toe and genitals, and when the telephone was cranked, it sent a powerful electric shock through the prisoner's body. If a prisoner were to be severely punished, they would receive a long-distance call that sent a series of electric shocks in a row. In addition to the Tucker telephone, inmates within the Arkansas prison system were punished with beatings, whippings, torture with pliers, and needles put under their fingernails. The 1980 movie Brubaker, which is loosely based on events in Arkansas's prisons, depicts an inmate named Abram being tortured with the Tucker telephone. Survival. On January 26, 1972, flight attendant Vesna Volovic boarded JAT Flight 367 with her colleagues en route to Belgrade. Vesna was not supposed to be on the flight, but she agreed to work after a mix-up with the rotor. The flight departed at 3:15 p.m, and less than an hour later, an explosion tore through the plane's baggage compartment. The explosion caused the aircraft to break apart over the Czechoslovak village of Subska Kamenice. The passengers fell from 33,330 feet, a fall that took 3 minutes. 27 passengers and crew were killed, except for Vesna. She was discovered by a German man who heard her screaming amid the wreckage, and he was able to keep her alive until rescuers arrived. It was later discovered there was a bomb in the hold, placed there by terrorist group Ustashi. Vesna had a broken skull, 3 crushed vertebrae, and 2 broken legs, and woke up 3 days after the crash not remembering a thing. She made an almost complete recovery and still holds the world record for surviving the highest fall without a parachute. Haunted wine cabinet box. The Dybbuk box is a notorious wine cabinet said to be haunted by a Dybbuk, a malicious possessed spirit believed to be the dislocated soul of a dead person according to Jewish mythology. The cabinet was originally auctioned on eBay by Kevin Manis, who told the story of a Jewish Holocaust survivor who previously owned the box, who told him it contained the malicious spirit of a Dybbuk, and that the item had paranormal powers and was responsible for his bad luck and nightmares. Subsequent owners of the box told similar stories with their own claims of strange phenomena, and one of its owners sold the rights to the story of a Hollywood production company and was the inspiration for the film The Possession. The box was later gifted to Ghost Adventures star Zach Bagans to display in his museum, and in 2018, the rapper Post Malone claimed a spat of bad luck was caused by his contact with the cabinet. In a twist to the story, in 2021, Kevin Manis claimed he made the whole thing up as a creative project. Nightmare Climb. In 1985, climbers Joe Simpson and Simon Yates were climbing the Saula Grande mountain in Peru. As they neared the summit, Joe fell and broke his leg, and Simon was left with the task of getting his severely injured partner back down the mountain. Simon lowered Joe 300 feet at a time when suddenly he started to slip. Simon felt the rope go taut and knew Joe had gone over the drop. Simon believed he'd lost his friend, and when the snow he was sitting on began to move, he knew he had no choice but to cut the rope. Simon believed his friend must be dead and made his way down the mountain back to the campsite. However, Joe had landed on a ledge and was able to crawl to safety. 3 days later, Joe arrived at the camp, dehydrated and starving. He had lost 42 pounds in 3 days, but miraculously was alive, and Simon nursed his friend back to full health. Joe Simpson told his story in the book Touching the Void. Adolfo de Jesús Constanzo. As a teenager, Adolfo de Jesús Constanzo began to practice a religion called Palo Mayombe, which involves animal sacrifice. He continued the practice into adulthood and moved to Mexico City, where he began a profitable business, casting spells to bring good luck, which involved expensive ritual sacrifices of chickens, goats, snakes, zebras, and even lion cubs. Many of his clients were rich, powerful members of Mexican society, including high-ranking corrupt policemen and powerful drug cartels. However, to boost his powers, Constanzo moved from animal sacrifice to humans, and started raiding graveyards for human bones to put in his cauldron. His followers believed that the spirits of dead humans were more powerful than animals, and soon he moved on to live human sacrifices. In total, he killed at least 20 victims, whose mutilated bodies were found in and around Mexico City. The process escalated further when Constanzo decided that he needed the power of a brain from an American student, culminating with the 1989 murder of Mark Kilroy. Constanzo also believed his magic was responsible for the success of the cartels, and demanded to become a full business partner with one of the most powerful families he knew, the Calzadas. When his demand was rejected, 7 Caldaza's family members disappeared. Their bodies turned up later with fingers, toes, ears, brains, and in one case the spine missing. Eventually, some of Constanzo's followers were convicted with a range of crimes, including murder, but Constanzo and 4 of his followers fled, and when he mistakenly thought the police had found him, he ordered one of his followers to shoot him. We'll finish up with the cursed Harlow house. High in the hills above Los Angeles, nestled in the trees of Benedict Canyon, is the former home of iconic 1930s movie actress Jean Harlow. In 1932, Harlow moved into the home with her new husband Paul Byrne, but less than 2 months later, he shot himself in the head while standing in front of a mirror. There was much speculation at the time that Byrne was murdered by his ex-girlfriend Dorothy Millette, who had visited him on the day of his death. This superstition was exacerbated when Dorothy jumped off a boat to her death just 2 days after Byrne's suicide. Jean moved out of the house after her husband's death, but died just a few years later at the age of 26 from kidney failure. In 1963, celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring bought the home and lived there with his girlfriend Sharon Tate until she left him for Roman Polanski. But the two remained friends until both of them were murdered by the Charles Manson cult. Tate was the same age as Harlow when she passed. Reportedly, when Tate lived at the house, she told friends of several creepy occurrences, including the apparition of a creepy little man who she believed was Paul Byrne's ghost. Many believe the house is both cursed and haunted by the ghosts of both Byrne and Harlow. What do you think? So that's it for this video. We hope you enjoy these 25 scary true horror stories. Remember, let us know in the comment section below on which cases you'd like us to go more in depth, and we'll consider them for a future video. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.